Tuesday's market closes lower in the livestock, but a higher day in the grains. Joining us to visit about that, Vince Boddicker with Farmers Trading Company. An update in the grains, soybeans taking the leadership role. Was that all about weather or the meal market being higher?
I think it's probably a combination of those. What drove meal? There really wasn't any news out there, but you wonder if it wasn't the missile attacks in a couple of ports on Monday night in Ukraine that made things think, well, we get the items out of there we need. Maybe we're going to have to replace sunflowers with meal from soybeans to do some of those things. But weather coming up, as we know, the forecast for Tuesday noon in there was setting up for hot weather for the next 3 weeks in that major part of the corn belt, if not all of it, and that's critical time for soybeans.
Yeah, so you would expect with the weather looking like it is for August that soybeans would take the leadership here. Now, how high do you think we're going to go there?
First of all, you got to think 1398 to 1402 in November are some key resistance areas. Then you're going to look at 1418 and probably 1440 to 1450. If we come back and we get in bad enough weather that we take yields below 50 as we get all done, you're probably going to see 15 plus. But right now, I think you take it a step at a time and think mid 14s is a good short-term target.
So corn really not able to follow the soybean or the wheat market as much as we would have liked, not able to really get much above that $6 mark or close above it. How disappointing is that if you're a technician?
I think a little bit, but let's see what tomorrow does. 40-cent plus gains 2 days after how we beat this thing up. You would have thought maybe somebody's going to come in and sell it. And we did mid-morning when we took it down to somewhere around that 591 region, 589, and brought it right back, which I was impressed with. So I think you're okay. We do need to close above it to keep going, but if we can, then you got to think 622 to 630 is your next target.
Right, and corn is kind of past that real critical reproductive stage. Now we're getting there anyways, right?
Right. Pollination should be there. We probably did some damage in areas, I think, certain states, but it's one of those things that's you got to fill. We need moisture for that, but it's not quite as critical. I think the trade looking at it anyway is beans are going to be coming up.
So do you think maybe a little bit of the weather story is also coming into play in these grains from what's going on in Europe? I mean, they're having a terrible heat wave. You would think that would be helping to push the wheat market a bit.
I think you have to believe that, and we got to keep in mind that Europe gets most of their grain from Ukraine, and if that doesn't happen, where they're going to go? The real question on that is the United States would be a legitimate one, but Europe does not like GMO products, so are they going to get like China does, that if I'm hungry, I'll eat it. If I'm not, I won't?
Yeah. So do you think the wheat market is trying to put in a low? We went down and kind of tested some really long-term support in all three exchanges.
I think so. I felt that 2 weeks ago, Friday, or a week ago last Friday, that we put the low in when KC went to 820, and last week when it went to 814, I had some longer-term targets at 815. Seasonally, we got enough of that crop harvested that we should be putting in a low. It might be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but I think there's more upside than downside at present time.
Well, it was impressive considering the dollar was up as much as it was today, that's for sure. So
Exactly.
let's move over to the cattle market. Seeing a bit of a profit-taking setback here the last couple of days, but we kind of got up into some chart resistance areas that we couldn't take out, right?
We did. You got to some areas that as high as you've been for the last several months. We're still going to have adequate kill numbers for the next 2 months, probably through mid-October. And then we got to keep in mind that the futures trade is looking forward. But I would think for this next month, they may find some pressure in here just on adequate numbers, depending on where demand. We're going to get Thursday of this week. We're going to see what the FOMC does with interest rates. Does that shake anybody up on a recession scare? And as we noted earlier, usually around the 22nd of each month, cattle like to put in a high or low, and we may have put a high and need a setback.
Yeah. What are you thinking about cash? We haven't had anything established here. We've had 2 weaker weeks, though.
And I think it's with that behind us, it puts a little bit of the ball in the Packers' court. They're going to try to save some if they can. I think it really comes down to where demand is at. Last Friday's cold storage report did show us from a domestic standpoint that we have adequate supplies there compared to a year ago. So they can try to squeeze the short term if they want to.
Yeah, I always look at that with a grain of salt, though, because when they're loading up those freezers, sometimes it means that's because they're going to export. So I always got to look at that. What about this hog market? We got up there into some pretty lofty levels pushed by the lean hog index, and now we've set back the last couple of days. Are we putting a little intermediate top in, or is this just a little bit of routine profit taking?
I think it could be a decent top to summer highs of what we're doing. I had targets around 117 to 119. We got into that region. I think we have to have some really serious pushes in the cash market to believe that we're going to go a lot higher, at least short term. And as we get 3 weeks from now or so, we're going to start increasing those slaughter numbers. And I think the trade is looking at that.
Yeah, August really got pushed by this very tight slaughter pace that we've had the last 2 weeks, hasn't it?
Yes, much. I think that's a lot of what we're doing, and this is a seasonal time of year where we top this market and start heading back down.
Okay, thanks for joining us. That's Vince Boddicker with Farmers Trading Company.